The date is April the 9th, 2018, and it's time for a Q&A. So for those of you just joining, all you have to do is leave your questions in the comment section below, and in 2 weeks they may be answered. Every other week we're going to be doing a Q&A with a podcastrophe episode in between, featuring guests. Let me know how your Monday is going in the comment section, guys. I sure hope it's going better than mine, because I have a sinus infection, and it is the worst thing in the world. But we're going to start this week off with a question from ShmeGamer503, who says, Q&A, if you think Halo 6, what do you think if Halo 6 was an open-world Halo game? Would it be a good or bad move for the Halo series? So I've heard this question asked a lot, and it depends. Now, the mainline Halo games, no. I think that they should follow specific tropes. Like, I think that Halo 5 went the farthest in terms of really breaking tradition and doing a couple of things I'm not a fan of, mainly the guns down missions. I don't think they work well in the mainline Halo games, the enhanced mobility, a lot of that stuff. I think that the mainline Halo games need to follow a set number of tropes, just because you want to maintain franchise identity. Now, when it comes to spin-off games, that's an entirely different story. That's where you can experiment and get weird. Kind of like Halo 3 ODST, Halo Reach, and famously Halo Wars, which opted to become a flat-out RTS game, which was very different for Halo. Now, if Halo were to become some kind of open-world game in a spin-off, funny enough, I'd actually kind of follow the Destiny formula, because Destiny, for all its woes, I do think it has some interesting things going for it, and I think that if Destiny were to be done differently, say, like in Halo, and with Halo 5's gameplay, I think that the enhanced mobility would actually work a lot better in some kind of open-world RPG-ish game. I mean, I say RPG, and right off the top of my head, that sounds bad. But it's all down to execution. It's down to how well it's executed, and an open-world Halo game with Halo 5's enhanced mobility, I don't think couldn't be done well. That's just my opinion on that. So the next question comes from RZI Productions, who says, do you think Master Chief likes pineapples on his pizza? And the answer is yes, because pineapples on pizza is fucking amazing. People need to shut up. Moving on. Sarah117 says, hey Q&A, when I was playing Halo 5, I heard the monitor exuberant say, when Cortana enters the domain, she would be reborn into the physical world. Where do you think this will fit into Halo 6? So, right off the bat, that was a terrible line of dialogue in Halo 5. I think Halo 5 definitely has many contenders for clumsiest bit of dialogue in the Halo series. And definitely Cortana will be reborn into the physical world is one of the clumsiest lines of dialogue in the series. Because the domain doesn't work like that, and also it sounds ridiculous when you say out loud, even by Halo standards. But the domain doesn't really work like that, which is something that I have a bit of issue with Halo 5. If you guys don't know what the domain is, which I don't blame you, the Halo games do a very bad job of explaining what it is, despite Halo 4 and 5 extensively referencing the domain. Essentially, the domain is sort of like Halo's equivalent to the Force, only it has limitations, like you can't use it to lift objects and stuff. But the domain was at its full power during the Forerunners era in the Halo galaxy. And it was sort of like, I guess the best way to describe it is it's like a cloud. Where information gets stored in it, and you can spiritually tap into it and kind of relive the memories of your ancestors and stuff. If I remember right, one of the rules of the domain, though, is it doesn't just have access to any information about anything that you want to know. Specifically, all the information in the domain is based on the memories of people. So it's like you can go through billions of years worth of memories to kind of find the answers you're looking for. But it's like, say, in this corner of the galaxy, there was a rock, and a plant sprouted on that rock. If nobody actually saw that plant sprout, and they couldn't form the memories of that plant sprouting, then, like, the domain wouldn't know. So it's entirely based on people's memories and stuff. So basically, the Forerunners would commune with the domain a lot so that they could access the memories of their ancestors to kind of help guide them in the future, you know, kind of, yeah, it's basically the Force, you know, it's like communing with Force ghosts and stuff like that. It's very, very odd, and it doesn't help that lately 343 has been doing a lot of reinterpreting or retconning or rewriting existing Halo lore, probably in the hopes that they could figure out ways to kind of dig themselves out of this hole that they wrote themselves into with Halo 5, but in Halo 5, basically Cortana uses the power of the domain to give herself a physical body, which is sort of why at the end of Halo 5 she's walking around and she has like comical armor on, which, I mean, that's, you know, it's its whole thing, but yeah. The Halo 6 now, Cortana is a physical being, which, despite me not liking it, it's a sad reality we have to deal with. She's no longer a sexy hologram lady, now she's a sexy lady, but she happens to be blue. So, I mean, it's hard to say how that will play into Halo 6 or even why that had to happen, because I feel like narratively it would have been more interesting to have a bad guy you can't even touch because it's a digital being, but okay, Cortana's a physical being, she's probably going to become a big monster, suit up in a gigantic piece of Forerunner armor, and we're going to have a big dumb boss battle where we have to kill her, or something like that. It's hard to say, really. If I'm grasping at straws or I sound like I'm really struggling or just rambling, it's because I am. I really don't know how to answer this question just because of, like, it's like, how dumb do I think Cortana being in the physical world could be in Halo 6? And my mind is just racing with a number of answers. Now, that being said, Bungie's Marathon series, which I've been playing through, it discussed the ideas of AI basically becoming sentient and transcending the digital realm to become almost like godlike. The idea that Marathon introduced that, funny enough, Bungie actually carried into Halo, and then 343 even took up the mantle from Bungie and continued these themes in Halo 4 and some of the expanded material there. But in Marathon, the idea was like, when AI begin to break down because they've been in active service for so long, they start to enter stages of what's called rampancy, where it's the AI starting to fall apart. And there are different stages to rampancy. You know, there's like insanity, anger, jealousy, and the final stage of rampancy is basically the AI has a choice. The AI becomes so crazy that it becomes woke, if that makes any sense, where it's like suddenly the AI has entered a state of godhood mentally. And so the AI now has a choice. Is it going to give in to the insanity and just completely collapse under its own intellectual weight? Or is it going to find a way to keep itself alive and pursue becoming a digital god and kind of, in a sense, become more than just a computer program? Like, it'll become so intelligent that it's no longer obeying the laws of physics, it's no longer just a computer, it's a god, essentially. And so in Halo now, starting with Halo 4, or not Halo 4, but Halo Combat Evolved, you know, Bungie was kind of talking about Cortana entering the stages of rampancy, starting with Combat Evolved, where she entered the computer on the Halo ring, and then that kind of jump-started her rapid kind of deconstruction from rampancy because of all the information that was downloaded into her head. And then 343 took that a step further and began to discuss how the Forerunners were experimenting with different ways to kind of transcend the physical and digital form, like become something more, almost the next step of evolution for beings in the Milky Way galaxy. And the Prometheans, the interesting thing about that is you're seeing kind of almost like the first baby steps toward that. You're fighting organic beings that have transcended and stepped over the barriers into the digital realm, and then you've got AI who want to do the same thing. They want to break down the barriers and become organic. And sadly, Halo 5 continued that theme, but didn't do it well at all. So we're gonna see, how this goes, but we're gonna move on to the next question. And the next question comes from Connor Byron, who says, Q&A. Hey Late Night Gaming, question for you. What would be your opinion if the next Halo game introduced some sort of smoke grenade? And a follow-up question. What new and or old grenades would you bring into the next Halo title? Cheers. So, a smoke grenade. I've thought about this and immediately my mind had bad flashbacks to the flare from Halo 3, if you remember that. You deployed it and basically nobody could see, including you. I don't think that the Halo series needs anything like that, because I think currently, kind of almost starting with Halo 3, the series began experimenting with different types of weaponry or combat loops that sadly grinded the game to a halt. With Halo 3, you had the flare, where you deploy it and suddenly for a couple of seconds nobody can do anything. And it doesn't really affect the game that much. I mean, yes it does, but what it does is just bring disorder and chaos. It breaks the flow and pacing of the match, because just for a few seconds you can't do jack shit. And so you're just running around blind, and then the blindness wears off, and then everyone goes back to killing each other. Ultimately, it doesn't help the pacing, it just stops it. And then Halo Reach went a step further and added the different armor abilities. So you had active camo, which disrupted your ability to read the radar. And that just caused a bunch of issues because it made your radar very unreliable, and so, it added a bit of disorganization. And then, infamously, or I should say famously at this point, armor lock, where nothing really changes. All that happens is, for a couple of seconds, the battle stops. Somebody goes into armor lock, everyone stops firing, and they just sit there and wait. And wait. And then the armor lock breaks and chaos ensues. So it doesn't add anything, it just halts the battle in its progress. It's kind of like everyone hitting pause for a second, and then resuming the game a couple seconds later. And then, Halo 4 had its own host of issues, and with Halo 5, you've kind of got the issue where, because everyone has unlimited sprint and you kind of need that to navigate the environments, you can't fire while moving at max speed, which introduces its own host of issues, as well as clamber. You can't fire while making specific jumps like you could in previous games by just executing, a crouch jump, but it's its own discussion. It's hard to introduce new mechanics into Halo without it actually breaking the pace of Halo, just because unfortunately Bungie balanced Halo so well, and I don't think Halo is a series that should have continued, because obviously it's so well balanced that it's very hard to introduce new mechanics without breaking that balance, and so sadly you're kind of stagnant, and by continuing to do the same thing over and over again, people will get bored. But by introducing new mechanics, you run the risk of breaking what made the series special in the first place. Example being kind of the post-Halo 3 era of Halo, like Reach 4 and 5. I guess in terms of grenades that would be returning, I don't know, because the fire grenade I don't think I could see being very useful. And in the few areas that I could see it being useful, I could see it being more obnoxious. The idea that there's this thing that you throw it and then it slowly drains your health, and there's no way that you can kind of jump in water or roll around on the ground to get rid of the fire, so it reminds me a lot of, in Destiny 1, there was this weapon that a lot of Destiny players talk about. I have no clue, I've never experienced it personally, but it was called, I believe, the Thorn, and the idea is when you get hit by a bullet from the Thorn, for the next couple of seconds, your health will drain. So if you win a gunfight, but a guy was able to hit you with a couple rounds of the Thorn, it didn't really matter because you were then going to die a couple of seconds later because of the health drain. And for me, just hearing that, I can hear how obnoxious that sounds. That it's sort of like, it doesn't really matter if you win the gunfight or not. Just get a couple rounds in, and then that guy will be doomed a couple seconds later. And with the firebomb grenade, that also sounds very obnoxious. Though it acting as a sort of area denial bomb, I do think that role has already been filled by the pulse grenade. I forgot what they call it in Halo 5 now, but the Promethean grenade. that's sort of already filled that role of area denial. I don't know, maybe in the campaign you could do more interesting things with it, and then just not put it on any of the multiplayer maps so it doesn't break flow or balance or anything, because that's always a possibility. Not everything needs to be completely 100% viable in the multiplayer. The flamethrower from Halo 3 is a prime example of such a weapon, where that weapon is hot garbage in the multiplayer, but in campaign, it's a lot of fun, you know, because the Flood run at you, and so they're always in your face, where the flamethrower is very useful. And finally, we are going to close this week off with a question from Joseph Long, who says, Q&A, do you think that adding more species or a group could help Halo to continue and fix the story, or do you think that the universe is too chaotic as it is? Love the videos, thank you for making them. This is a very interesting question, because I do think it is a question that a lot of Halo fans need to begin asking themselves. What is Halo to you? So, in my head, now this isn't something that I do think is viable, but I'd like to see the Banished take over from the Covenant. That way we can have the core combat loop of Jackal, Elite, Grunt, in terms of, you know, Halo level design, but we don't need to keep fighting the Covenant over and over again. The issue, though, is that the Covenant are very marketable. The general audiences, when they think of Halo, they think of, oh, that's the game where you shoot the purple guys called the Covenant. And so you can't really break away from that. You know, I do think that's why the newer Halo games just refuse to get away from the Covenant, that name. And I do think in Halo 6, despite Halo 5, we finally kind of killed off the rest of the different Covenant splinter groups that kind of ran amok when Truth died, and kind of created this power vacuum for the different little sects of the Covenant to try to take control. Now we finally killed them off, so it's like, well, there's no Covenant anymore at all, period. But we need to fight Covenant because it's a Halo game, so what's probably going to happen is there's going to be a new Covenant that forms that worships AI. And I think that's where the series is going to go from there. We're just going to keep fighting Covenant, only this time they worship AI instead of ancient aliens. But if I could have my perfect world, where the way that I would run Halo was successful, I would switch out the Covenant for the Banished. I'd have us fighting the Banished. I would have us fighting different Covenant splinter groups. Maybe even little groups where Jackals are more dominant, like pirate groups. You could still have elites and grunts working with them, but their armor looks a lot shittier, it looks a lot more slapped together. You know, a lot of their banshees look like they were welded together from different wreckage pieces, or even, you know, possibly integrating some UNSC tech into them without, you know, breaking gameplay reasons. Just, I think it would be interesting to fight kind of shitty Covenant. Guys, I hope this provided an entertaining video, but I am literally dying, and not the internet version of literally where they overuse it. I mean, I am actually dying right now, and so I need to go lie down, take some meds for my head, which is pounding. Stay safe, guys, stay healthy, and I hope that you guys enjoy the rest of your Monday.